That was Press Secretary Jay Carney yesterday, doubling down on recent White House remarks that GOP plans for reducing the nation's debt are going to have to include more taxes. That comes just a week after almost 3/4 of American workers saw their paychecks take a hit, in many cases because of a 2% Social Security tax hike. Joining me now, Simon Rosenberg, who's president and founder of the New Democrat Network and a former campaign advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Michael Graham, who's a columnist for the Boston Herald and radio talk show host. Gentlemen, welcome. And so, you know, the 77% of Americans who got hit with the Social Security increase, that tax increase, there's been a lot of talk about that. I mean, it feels like you can't go anywhere without people saying, I thought it was just the rich, and being rather surprised that everybody was hit. Everybody was hit. Income taxes went up on the rich, but everybody got hit with that Social Security tax. And so I'll start with you on this, Michael, whether you think, because the population is feeling a little like, wait a minute, I thought it was just going to be the rich, and it turned out to be me, whether there is the political will to get another round of tax increases done in Washington.
Megyn, don't you remember the My 2K push that the White House had 2 weeks ago? What are you going to do with your $2,000 that we're going to go take from Richie Rich and give to you? Look, the entire message of the Obama campaign was, let me go tax evil rich people, and it's nothing but unicorns and fairy dust for the rest of us. Turns out that's completely untrue, and of course the worst part is President Obama got the tax hike he wanted. He offered no cuts then, and now he's going to go back and say, well, we've already had the cuts. There are no cuts. So how does he make the case that, A, I misled you on what the tax hike could accomplish, and B, it doesn't matter, we had no cuts, we're still not going to cut. When he says balanced, remember, last time we did balanced was the fiscal cliff deal, all taxes, no cuts.
Simon, what do you think of it? Because I know President Obama wants to continue raising taxes on the rich, and he doesn't think that he's done yet. But Americans may not buy the argument that this is just about the rich, given what we just saw happen on January 1st with everybody's taxes.
Well, I think let's see what happens. I mean, I think right now Jay Carney laid it out. I think the president has already put a lot of spending cuts on the table. He's already accepted $1 trillion of domestic spending cuts. I think you'll see a lot of emphasis in the next few months on continuing to reduce the cost of Medicare and Medicaid, the rate of growth of health care in the United States. I think defense will probably be, they'll be looking at defense cuts similar to what was in the sequestration, perhaps a little bit less. And so the Democrats have already put a lot of spending cuts on the table. The Democrats didn't get all the tax increases they wanted, right? I mean, the number that the president took was much lower than what he had originally negotiated. So I think you're going to see the president lay out a budget in a couple of weeks. The Republicans, led by Paul Ryan, will probably pass a budget in the House. Hopefully the Senate will pass a budget this year, and that, you know, we'll have regular order, and the two parties can come together and fight it out and make a significant down payment towards deficit reduction. Yeah.
Simon, could you name some of these spending, like that $1 trillion in spending cuts you're talking about? Well, what are some of those spending cuts? Could you help me out with that?
Well, they lowered the number for all domestic spending, right? The number was lowered, and what the Congress is going to have to do now is make budgets fit that.
Was adjusted. I'm sorry, the baseline was adjusted. It presumes higher spending, and then it reduced the presumption of higher spending. There were no cuts. So name some cuts. How about the money they cut from the troops in Iraq? Oh, wait a minute. The troops from Iraq left last year. The fact is there are no cuts, and you know it. The fiscal cliff deal increased net spending, zero cuts.
Let me jump in, because I do.
Not true.
But I want to keep the focus on taxes for now, if we could, because you know, how high can they go, Simon? I mean, the so-called rich in this country, they're now paying 39.6% income tax to the federal government, plus they got a 0.8% income tax hike thanks to Obamacare, plus they too got the 2% put back on them. Plus, now they have high state taxes and city taxes in some cases, and are paying well over 50% in taxes. So they're making, you know, 45 cents on the dollar that they earn. I mean, how much is too much, in your view, on the rich?
I think we're going to find out this year through negotiation. I mean, right now where things stand.
But what's your thought on it?
No, I think my thought is that this is going to be negotiated, right? I mean, I don't think it's up to Simon Rosenberg as much as I'd like to be able to dictate to everybody what happens this year. I think the critical thing is that, you know, right now in terms of GDP, we're taking in 17 to 18% of GDP in revenue, and we're spending 21%. And by historical margin, the country's not actually spending that much money, particularly given the size of the defense expenditures right now. We've got to get revenue up, and we've got to get spending down.
Where do you get the revenue
if we want to get this done?
Where do you get the revenue from? Because when
Megyn?
Simon was advising President Bill Clinton was satisfied with these rates, that the rich would pay the 39.6%. Apparently, the Democrats now, Michael, want to raise them even higher. And the question is, because it's not just federal taxes, as all the viewers who work know. You got to pay state and you got to pay city in a lot of cases. You got to pay property taxes on top of that and so on.
Sure.
But just in terms of income tax, there are millions of people in this country now who are well over 50% of the taxes. I mean, psychologically, is that not a bar, even for people who are not rich? That, how much is too much?
Well, if you're part of the 47% that pays nothing in federal income taxes, you don't care how high that number goes. And that's part of the divisive politics that the White House is engaged in. They've really divided. It's interesting you mentioned the Bill Clinton era tax rates. Remember, a handful of Democrats voted for the Bush tax cuts. The vast majority voted to keep the tax rates higher on the middle class when Simon was working with President Clinton. Almost all those Democrats have flipped. They're now all against the Bill Clinton rates in the middle class. That's where the money is. Spending, I'm sorry, Simon, the number's close to 23.8% on the spending rates that President Obama has proposed. To keep that massive level of spending, which is 30% higher than the norm, then I'm sorry, you're going to have to go to the middle class and take money from them, too. The rich just don't have that much money. That's the thing, is
the revenue, you can't get it all from the rich. Even if now they went back and said, well, we've protected people over 250 to 450, that 200,000.
Sure.
We protected them. Even if they went back now, Simon, and said, we're not going to protect them. Actually, we're going to hike their taxes, too. It's not going to do it. And even if you raise the taxes on everybody 250 and over another, 2 percentage points? And keep in mind, there's some discussion about raising that Social Security tax we all pay, too, because Social Security's in trouble in the 2020s, and they're thinking about ways to make up the difference. So, I mean, we're talking about raising all these taxes, and I just wonder whether on the left there's a perception that there is a number beyond which we cannot go. I know Bernie Sanders has been on the program saying, between 75 and 85% income tax is fine with him.
Well, that's not, I don't think that the president has said the rates are not going to go higher than they are now. He's said that repeatedly. He said he wanted to go back to the Clinton tax rates. And I think the area that will be looked at this year is the area where Republicans have already indicated a lot of interest, which is in closing loopholes that weren't closed during the fiscal cliff discussion.
But they offered that as an alternative to raising the tax rate.
I understand. But in the Simpson-Bowles proposal, for example, which everybody says was a great idea, it closed a lot of tax loopholes for wealthy people. Remember, the other big tax cuts.
President Obama rejected that. The Republicans offered the loophole closure, which would have brought in more revenue, and he rejected that because he wanted the rates.
No, it wouldn't have brought in more revenue. The reason, remember, he compromised. He didn't get everything he wanted out of this.
I know that.
So from where things were in the beginning.
What I said is true.
I know, but it's not the point. You don't get more money through closing loopholes than you do in raising rates.
That's not true. He would have gotten more money with the deal the Republicans were proposing. He rejected it. He wanted the rates higher.
Megyn, it's not true. I mean, we could debate this for a long time, but go ahead, Michael.
Megyn, the rates are always going to be higher. Look, the fiscal cliff deal was, we'll raise taxes and cut spending. What do? They raise taxes, no cutting spending. So now they come back and say, well, hey, we've got to raise some more taxes because look at all this spending. So they're going to propose more tax hikes and no fundamental shifts in spending. Medicare is going to continue to explode. Social Security is going to continue to be in the red as it's been for 3 years in a row. And nothing's going to change except for they're going to say, and we need more of your money. That's all that's going to happen. It's tax
Megyn, if I got one last bite here is that I got to tell you, I'm very tired of coming on the air here and listening to Republicans talk about how the Democrats don't want to cut Medicare when we put real cuts on the table and Mitt Romney wanted to spend $716 billion more in Medicare. We've cut Medicare. The Republicans have tried to increase spending on Medicare. Democrats have demonstrated a willingness to deal with entitlements, to reduce defense, raise taxes. We've got to do all three of those things if you want to deal with the deficit. If you want to just have political shouting on these kinds of shows, you can do that. It's not enough money to get there. We've already shown that we're willing to do the hard stuff. We're still waiting for the Republicans to come with a real plan that actually cuts spending, which they never offered during any of the fiscal cliff negotiations, not one time.
Now that is a fair point, Michael. The Republicans did not take the leadership on
you cannot
spending
yell
cuts.
at Republicans who passed the Republicans passed the Ryan budget twice. That is courage. That is leadership. The money that got cut from Medicare went straight to Obamacare. It's the same government. It's one government pocket to another. That's not a cut. Obamacare is going to drive spending up. Everybody knows it. And the plan is to just keep spending.
It's funny because during the election, the Republicans argued that was a cut, that the Democrats had cut Medicare, and the Democrats said, no, we didn't cut Medicare. And now that Obama has won re-election, President Obama, it's the reverse. But that's the silly place that we define as Washington, D.C. Guys, thank you both.
Thanks, Megyn.
Thank you.
Coming up next, talk show host Bill Maher recently attacked Donald Trump with an ugly accusation, and he offered him